The small girl had always been quiet, the kind of child who would rather sit in a corner and watch the world than rush into it. She had soft brown hair that fell over her eyes when she bent down to examine things, and a gentle smile that would appear when no one expected it. Music was her world, though, and she had discovered it almost by accident. She would hum to herself while drawing, tap on tabletops as if they were drums, and sometimes, late at night, her fingers would dance on the small keyboard her family had in the living room. Music gave her courage in ways words could not. The town where she lived was small, and the local school often organized events to showcase talent. Parents and neighbors would gather, filling the old hall with chatter and laughter. Children would take turns performing songs, reciting poems, or showing their art. This year, the teachers decided to have a piano performance as part of the annual event, and they needed someone to play a piece that was challenging but beautiful. They wanted someone who could bring life to the notes, someone special. The girl had never considered herself special in that way. She had played the piano quietly at home, teaching herself little melodies and experimenting with sounds, but she had never performed in front of anyone. Her mother noticed her playing one evening and suggested, softly, that she might consider trying for the school event. The girl shook her head, her hands hovering over the keys. The thought of standing on a stage in front of so many people made her stomach twist. She was small, her voice soft, and she feared that everyone would laugh if she made a mistake. But the teachers had already seen her talent. One of them had overheard her playing during a music class and had been amazed by the way her fingers moved effortlessly, creating sounds that felt alive. They discussed quietly among themselves and decided to give her a chance, believing that her natural gift could shine if she allowed herself to step forward. The day the list of performers was posted, the small girl's name appeared next to the piano section. She saw it while walking past the notice board, her eyes widening. A mix of emotions washed over her. Her heart pounded with excitement and fear. She felt proud that someone had noticed her, but at the same time, she felt small and unsure. She could hear the whispers of other children and parents nearby, speculating about who would play and whether they would be good enough. She took a deep breath and pressed her fingers together, trying to imagine herself at the piano, confident and fearless. In the week leading up to the event, she practiced in secret. Her room became a sanctuary where the music could flow freely. She experimented with the tempo, tried different melodies, and corrected mistakes she had never noticed before. Sometimes, she would stop and put her head in her hands, frustrated when her fingers would fumble, but she would always try again. Slowly, she began to feel a sense of control and confidence growing within her. The music was no longer just a sound. It was a part of her, something that made her feel alive. Meanwhile, at school, other children were preparing as well. They rehearsed in groups, their voices echoing through the hallways, and practiced their own performances with excitement. Some whispered about the small girl chosen to play the piano, not knowing much about her. Some doubted that she could handle the challenging piece she was assigned. The small girl heard snippets of conversation as she walked past, but she focused on the music, letting the notes guide her, shielding herself from the noise of doubt. Her parents noticed the change in her. She was quieter than usual, more focused, often lost in thought with a faint smile on her lips. They encouraged her gently, reminding her that she was capable and talented. Her mother would sit nearby, listening as she played, feeling proud and nervous at the same time. She would nod quietly, offering a reassuring smile whenever the girl looked up. Her father would sometimes tap lightly on the piano cover, marking the rhythm with her, helping her feel the music in her entire body. The night before the event, the girl could hardly sleep. She kept replaying the music in her mind, imagining herself on the stage. Her fingers twitched with anticipation. She knew that once she stepped onto that stage, everything would change. The fear of failure loomed large, but it was now mixed with a strange excitement. She imagined the applause, the smile on her mother's face, and the warmth of the spotlight on her. It was frightening, yes, but it was also beautiful. On the morning of the event, she woke up early. The sunlight streamed through her window, painting golden patterns on the floor. She wore a simple dress that her mother had chosen, something comfortable yet neat. She took a deep breath and practiced one last time, letting the music fill the quiet of her room. Each note felt like a small step forward, each melody like a reassurance that she could do this. When she arrived at the school hall, she was greeted by the hum of voices and laughter. Children ran past, teachers organized the last details, and parents found their seats. She held her small hands together, trying to calm the rapid beating of her heart. She saw the piano waiting at the front of the hall, shiny and polished, its black and white keys promising a world of music. She approached it slowly, feeling every step as if it were both heavy and light at the same time. As she was led to her seat by the teacher, the chatter in the hall seemed to fade away. She could feel all eyes on her, yet she closed them for a moment and let the familiar feeling of music surround her. She touched the keys lightly, feeling the coolness under her fingers. The hall waited in anticipation, the audience leaning forward without realizing it, curious to see what this small, quiet girl would do. She started with a simple note, testing the piano, listening to the echo of the sound bouncing off the walls. Slowly, she began the first melody, delicate and tentative, each note finding its place. She felt the music grow inside her, spreading warmth through her chest and into her hands. She was no longer just a small girl at the piano. She was a conduit for the music itself. The audience noticed the change too, a shift in the energy of the room, as if the music was weaving a story that only she could tell. Her fingers moved with a rhythm that seemed natural, almost magical. Every sound was soft yet clear, every pause filled with meaning. People in the audience leaned closer, drawn into the performance without realizing it. The small girl's heart raced, but she no longer felt fear. She felt alive, connected, and free. She was not performing for approval or applause. She was performing because the music lived inside her, and it demanded to be heard. By the time the first few bars ended, there was a hush in the room, a quiet respect for the small girl who dared to share something so delicate and powerful. The teacher standing nearby allowed herself a small smile, knowing that this child had something rare, something genuine. The parents in the audience exchanged glances, some surprised, some proud, but all touched in ways they could not yet explain. And so, the small girl sat at the piano, ready to continue, unaware that her simple courage and love for music would soon captivate everyone, and that her performance would be remembered long after the notes faded. In that moment, she was not small, not quiet, not unsure. She was simply herself, a small girl chosen to play piano, and she was about to show the world just how extraordinary she could be. After the small girl was chosen to play the piano, the days that followed were filled with both excitement and tension. Each morning, she would wake up early, thinking about the music and imagining herself sitting in front of the grand piano at the school hall. The piece she had to play was not easy. It had long sequences of notes that required precision, speed, and emotion. At first, she found herself overwhelmed, unsure if her small hands could move fast enough or reach the chords without making mistakes. She spent hours in her room, practicing slowly at first, learning each section carefully. Her mother would sit nearby, sometimes watching, sometimes quietly reading, always ready to encourage her. Each time the girl stumbled, her mother would gently say, "Try it again, just like last time. You can do it." Those words were simple but powerful, giving her the courage to continue. The girl learned patience in those moments, realizing that music was not just about speed or skill but about feeling and expressing. The girl's father also joined in, not with words but by helping her keep rhythm. He would tap on the table or hum along as she played, creating a sense of support and shared energy. Slowly, the girl began to feel the music inside her, not as separate notes to memorize but as a story to tell. She discovered that when she closed her eyes, the music became easier, flowing naturally from her fingers to the keys. At school, the other children were also practicing, but none seemed to notice the quiet determination of the small girl. Some whispered among themselves about how nervous she looked, wondering if she could really perform. Others didn't even think about her, caught up in their own rehearsals. The girl did not let this affect her. She focused entirely on the music, on the feelings each note carried, and on the image of herself playing confidently on stage. One afternoon, the music teacher invited her for a small session after class. Sitting at the piano, the teacher encouraged her to try the more challenging parts of the piece. "You have the ability to make this piece sing," the teacher said. "Do not worry about mistakes. Focus on how the music feels inside you." The small girl nodded, taking a deep breath. She tried the fast sequences again, and though her fingers stumbled a few times, she felt a small thrill when she finally played them correctly. Each success gave her confidence and pushed away some of her fear. The girl also began experimenting with small improvisations. Sometimes, she would add a note here or there, or linger on a melody she especially liked. These small changes gave the music a personal touch and made her feel even more connected to it. Music became a friend she could talk to without words, a companion that listened to her thoughts and worries. Even at home, the atmosphere was filled with music. Her parents noticed the subtle changes in her, how she moved with more assurance, how her smile appeared more often. They were careful not to push her too hard, knowing that pressure could take the joy out of her gift. Instead, they allowed her to explore, to learn at her own pace. This freedom helped her blossom, allowing her small hands to grow confident and sure on the keys. The week before the performance, the girl faced a moment of doubt. She had been practicing the same section for hours when she suddenly felt frustrated. Her fingers seemed slow, and the notes would not come out as smoothly as she wanted. She buried her face in her hands and thought about giving up. But then she remembered the teacher's words and the support of her parents. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and started again. This time, she played with emotion, letting the frustration and excitement flow into the music. The melody, once difficult, began to feel natural and expressive. She also started to imagine the audience, not as strangers who might judge her, but as listeners who were there to share in the story she wanted to tell. This changed her approach. She practiced with expression, paying attention to how the piece would make someone feel if they listened carefully. Each crescendo, each soft note became a way to reach out, to touch hearts. She began to feel that the performance was not just for her, but for everyone who would hear it. Her parents continued to support her quietly. Sometimes, her mother would bring a cup of tea and sit beside her, while her father would hum along to the rhythm. They did not try to correct her. They let her lead the way. Their quiet faith in her abilities became a source of strength. The girl realized that their belief in her was just as important as her own skill. She started to imagine them in the audience, smiling and proud, which made her feel braver. At school, small preparations for the event were underway. The hall was being cleaned and arranged, chairs lined up neatly, and the piano polished until it shone. The girl peeked at the hall one day and saw the empty seats, imagining the audience sitting there, waiting for her. The sight made her heart race, but it also made her focus more. She practiced with a new determination, imagining herself walking confidently to the piano, sitting down, and starting the piece without fear. Each practice session built her confidence. She learned to control her breathing, to listen carefully to each note, and to feel the flow of music in her entire body. By the end of the week, she could play the piece from start to finish without stopping, though she continued to practice every day. Her movements became natural, her fingers sure, her expressions genuine. The music was no longer just notes on a page. It was alive, and it lived in her. The small girl also learned to deal with nerves. Each day, she reminded herself that mistakes could happen, but they did not define her. She learned to start again, to keep going, and to trust that the music would guide her. This resilience became part of her preparation, as important as the notes themselves. She began to understand that performing was not just about being perfect, but about sharing something real. By the evening before the event, the girl felt a mix of excitement and calm. She had practiced so much that she knew the piece almost by heart, yet she still found joy in playing it. Her parents noticed her serene expression and felt proud. They knew she had grown not just as a musician, but as a person. The girl had faced her fears, worked hard, and discovered the joy of expressing herself through music. That night, she lay in bed imagining the next day. She pictured herself sitting at the piano, the audience quiet, listening. She imagined the music filling the hall, the notes floating like gentle waves, carrying feelings of wonder and beauty. She felt ready. She did not know what would happen, but she trusted herself and the music. For the first time, she realized that the performance was not about impressing anyone or being perfect. It was about letting the music tell its story, and letting herself be part of it. In the morning, she woke up with a sense of purpose. The sunlight filled her room, the birds sang outside, and everything seemed to promise a new beginning. She dressed simply, brushed her hair, and had a quiet breakfast. Each step she took felt like preparation, not just for the performance, but for a journey she had started long ago when she first discovered music. She felt the strength inside her, small but firm, ready to face the audience and let her talent shine. When she arrived at the school, the hall was filled with sounds of laughter, chatter, and excitement. Children practiced last-minute lines or songs, teachers adjusted microphones, and parents found seats, exchanging greetings. The small girl walked through it all quietly, holding her music in her heart and letting the familiar melodies guide her. She felt calm, yet her pulse quickened with anticipation. This was the moment she had prepared for, and she was ready to embrace it fully. As she sat at the piano for the first rehearsal in the hall, she felt the solid keys beneath her fingers and the weight of expectation in the air. Yet, instead of fear, she felt a quiet confidence. The practice at home, the support of her parents, and her own dedication had prepared her. She started to play softly at first, letting the notes resonate. Slowly, she began to feel the hall responding, the music stretching out to fill the space. She was no longer just a small girl. She was a storyteller, letting the piano speak through her. By the time the rehearsal ended, a few teachers had quietly watched and exchanged impressed looks. Even without a full audience, the girl had conveyed something special. She smiled, a small but genuine smile, realizing that she was ready for the real performance. The journey of preparation had changed her. She was stronger, braver, and more connected to her music than ever before. She was ready to face the audience and show them what she could do. The day of the performance finally arrived, and the small girl felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness as she entered the school hall. The room was filled with chatter, laughter, and the occasional squeak of chairs as parents and children settled into their seats. The sunlight poured through the windows, making the polished floor gleam, and the piano stood at the front of the hall, shiny and inviting. She took a deep breath and reminded herself of all the practice she had done, all the hours she had spent with her parents, and all the encouragement she had received. She was ready. As she waited for her turn, she watched other children perform. Some sang songs with bright, confident voices, while others stumbled through their lines, red-faced and nervous. The audience clapped politely for each performance, some children beaming with pride, others hiding their embarrassment. The small girl's hands were clasped together, her fingers twitching slightly as she felt the familiar pull of nerves. She took another deep breath and imagined the piano keys beneath her fingers, the notes she had practiced echoing in her mind. When her name was announced, she felt her heart leap. She stood slowly, smoothing her dress and walking toward the piano. The hall seemed quieter all of a sudden, as if everyone had shifted their attention to her. She climbed onto the piano bench and adjusted her posture, her small hands hovering over the keys. For a moment, she hesitated, feeling the weight of the audience's gaze. But then she closed her eyes and let the music take over. She remembered everything she had practiced, every small improvement, every moment of patience, and she let it guide her. The first notes were soft, delicate, and cautious. She played slowly, testing the feel of the piano and listening to how the sound filled the hall. She could feel the audience leaning forward, some curious, some skeptical. Her fingers moved carefully, yet naturally, as if the music itself knew where it wanted to go. The small girl's eyes remained closed for a few moments, allowing herself to connect with the piece fully, to let it flow through her. Each note became more confident than the last, and soon the melody began to gain strength. As she continued, the initial nervousness faded. She started to play with more expression, her hands moving fluidly across the keys. The audience began to notice the transformation. Some parents leaned forward in their seats, trying to catch every sound. Some children watched quietly, amazed that someone so small could produce such a powerful and moving performance. The small girl was not thinking about their reactions. She was entirely absorbed in the music. Each chord, each pause, each gentle touch of a key was a conversation between her and the piano. She reached the middle of the piece, where the music became faster and more complex. Her fingers flew across the keys with surprising agility, executing the difficult passages with precision. The audience gasped slightly, impressed by her skill. The small girl felt her pulse quicken, but she did not falter. She felt the rhythm in her body, the emotion in her heart, and she allowed it to guide her hands. The notes began to sound fuller, richer, as if the piano itself was alive, responding to her touch. She was no longer just playing. She was performing, telling a story without words. There were moments of silence between the louder sections, where the music softened and floated gently. During these moments, the small girl let her emotions show. Her brow furrowed slightly, her hands lingered on certain notes, and the audience could sense her connection to the music. People began to lean in, drawn by the subtle beauty of her playing. The room felt different somehow, quieter, more attentive, as if the audience collectively held their breath, not wanting to miss a single note. The performance began to build again, moving toward the grand finale. The small girl's fingers danced across the keys with increasing confidence, the melodies intertwining and rising, filling the hall with a sound that was both delicate and powerful. Some parents closed their eyes, moved by the emotion in the music. Some children whispered to each other, amazed that someone so small could play with such mastery and feeling. The small girl felt a sense of exhilaration. The music was no longer just something she played. It was something she shared, something that reached out and touched the hearts of everyone listening. As she approached the final section, the piece required a sudden change in tempo and intensity. The small girl felt a surge of determination. She pushed herself, playing with more power and emotion, her small hands commanding the piano with grace and skill. The audience was silent, captivated, watching every movement, every note. The music seemed to fill the room completely, leaving no space untouched. She felt a sense of triumph, not because she had impressed anyone, but because she had allowed herself to fully express what she felt inside. Finally, the last notes rang out, lingering in the air like a soft echo. The small girl held her hands over the keys for a moment, feeling the vibration and letting the silence settle. She opened her eyes and looked around. The audience was still, some with wide eyes, some with tears quietly forming. Then, slowly, the room erupted into applause. The sound was overwhelming, a mix of clapping, cheering, and exclamations of amazement. The small girl's cheeks flushed, a mixture of pride, relief, and joy. She had done it. She had shared her music, her talent, and her heart, and the audience had responded. The teachers rushed forward, smiling and congratulating her. Her parents were at the front of the hall, beaming with pride and relief. They clapped enthusiastically, their eyes shining as they watched their daughter take a small, humble bow. The small girl felt a rush of happiness and gratitude. The fear and nervousness she had felt before stepping on stage seemed distant now, replaced by the warmth of accomplishment and recognition. As people continued to applaud, some came forward to express their amazement. A few teachers shook their heads in disbelief, praising the small girl's skill and maturity. Parents whispered to each other about how extraordinary it was for such a young child to play with such emotion and control. Some children approached her, curious and inspired, asking questions about how she had learned to play so well. She smiled softly at them, modest and shy, happy to share the joy of music but not seeking attention for herself. After the applause died down, the small girl stepped down from the piano bench. She felt a strange mix of exhaustion and elation. The adrenaline of performing, the focus, and the emotion had drained her physically, but it had filled her heart with a sense of achievement she had never felt before. She walked toward her parents, who wrapped her in a warm embrace, whispering how proud they were. In that moment, she realized that all the practice, all the nervous anticipation, and all the moments of doubt had led to this feeling, pure joy in sharing her gift. The teachers took a few moments to organize the next performances, but the small girl remained in the hall, her eyes still reflecting the glow of the stage lights. She had discovered something important, that her music had power beyond what she had imagined, could move people, bring emotions to the surface, and create moments of connection between her and the audience. She felt a sense of purpose, a new understanding of her love for music and what it could mean to others. As the day went on, many parents and children approached her, offering kind words and compliments. She listened quietly, grateful and humbled. The small girl understood that the applause and recognition were not the goal. The real reward was the experience itself, the ability to share her feelings and touch hearts through her music. Each smile, each expression of wonder in the audience became part of her memory, a reminder of what courage and practice could achieve. By the end of the event, the small girl walked home with her parents, carrying a quiet sense of pride. She thought about the music, the notes, the keys, and the emotions she had poured into her performance. She realized that she had changed in those few minutes at the piano. She had faced her fears, trusted herself, and shared something truly special. The applause, the cheers, and the amazed expressions of the audience were proof, but more importantly, she felt it within herself. She was no longer just a small girl with a love for music. She was a performer, a storyteller, and someone who had learned to believe in her own abilities. As the small girl continued her performance, she reached a part of the piece that was both difficult and unexpected. This section required not only speed and accuracy but also a depth of emotion that was rare for someone her age. She paused for a brief moment, feeling the tension in the air and sensing the audience leaning forward, waiting for the next notes. She took a deep breath and let her fingers find their way across the keys, allowing the music to flow naturally, guided by her heart rather than her mind. The audience began to notice something extraordinary. The way her small hands moved with such precision, the way she could bring out both strength and softness from the piano, captivated everyone. Some parents felt a lump in their throats as the music carried emotions they did not expect to feel. Some children stared wide-eyed, amazed that someone so young and small could command the piano with such skill and expression. The room was filled with a quiet awe, a collective attention that seemed to hold its breath along with the girl. She reached the part of the piece where the melody swelled and became more dramatic. Normally, this section had been the most intimidating for her during practice. But in that moment, something changed. She felt a surge of confidence and connection with the music that she had never experienced before. Her fingers flew across the keys, each note ringing clearly and confidently. The audience gasped quietly at her ability to manage the complex passages with ease. It was as if she had transformed into a storyteller, with the piano as her voice and the music as her words. The small girl had also decided to add a subtle improvisation to the piece, something she had practiced secretly at home. She gently altered a few notes, extending a melody, and adding a soft flourish that highlighted her personal touch. It was daring, but she trusted herself. The audience responded instantly, some with widened eyes, some whispering to their neighbors, sensing that they were witnessing something truly unique. Her improvisation added a layer of emotion and creativity that elevated the performance from mere technical skill to art. She noticed the expressions of those sitting closest to the stage. A mother had her hand over her mouth, eyes glistening with tears. A child next to her whispered to a friend, amazed, barely able to believe that someone so small could play with such depth. Even the teachers, who had been impressed from the start, now looked on with astonishment. They could see the way she poured herself into the music, how she connected with each note and each pause, how she seemed to communicate directly with the audience through the piano. The girl's emotions became intertwined with the music. She felt joy, determination, and even a touch of vulnerability, allowing the audience to sense the authenticity of her performance. The hall, once filled with chatter and movement, was now silent except for the piano's voice. Every note seemed to carry weight, every pause felt significant, and the overall effect was mesmerizing. People leaned in, forgetting themselves, caught entirely in the story she was telling. She moved into the final part of the piece, a section that required both speed and careful control. Her fingers glided effortlessly, producing sound that was at once delicate and powerful. The audience was completely captivated. Some parents whispered to each other about how extraordinary it was to see such mastery in someone so young. Some children looked at her with awe, inspired and dreaming that perhaps they could also achieve something remarkable. She felt a quiet sense of satisfaction, knowing that her courage to add personal touches and practice diligently had brought her to this moment. The small girl also noticed a few details that made the experience more real and profound. She could feel the vibration of the piano keys beneath her fingers, the subtle resonance that carried through the hall. She could hear the faint intake of breath from the audience at certain moments, the small sighs and murmurs as they responded emotionally to her playing. Each of these small reactions fueled her determination to keep going, to give everything she had to the performance. At one point, she looked slightly up from the keys and caught the eyes of her parents in the front row. Their faces were radiant with pride and emotion. She smiled ever so slightly, reassured by their presence, and continued with renewed energy. The bond between her and her audience deepened, even if she did not speak or move, because the music itself communicated all that she could not put into words. She understood that this connection was the true magic of performing. As the climax of the piece approached, the music grew louder, fuller, and more intense. Her fingers flew across the keys with elegance and precision, producing a sound that filled every corner of the hall. Each chord, each note, was deliberate, expressive, and beautiful. The audience felt as though they were experiencing the music alongside her, not just listening. Some closed their eyes, letting the sound carry their imagination, while others watched intently, trying to capture every detail of her hands and expressions. The small girl's improvisation came to its peak during this climax. She added a flourish that she had only dared to attempt in the privacy of her practice sessions. It was bold, it was creative, and it was perfect. The audience's reaction was immediate and unmistakable. Gasps, widened eyes, and a sense of amazement swept through the hall. They had never expected such a young performer to have the confidence and talent to not only play the piece but also to add her own interpretation with such finesse. Finally, she began to slow down, moving into the closing section of the piece. The music softened, becoming gentle and reflective. Her fingers lingered on certain notes, letting them resonate, creating a sense of calm and closure. The audience leaned in, captivated, some holding their breath to experience the final notes. The small girl felt a sense of peace and fulfillment. She had given everything she had, and now she could let the music conclude naturally. When the last note rang out, there was a moment of silence, as if the hall itself was processing what had just happened. Then, the applause began slowly, hesitant at first, and quickly grew into a loud, enthusiastic ovation. People were on their feet, clapping, cheering, and expressing their astonishment. The small girl's cheeks flushed, a mixture of pride, joy, and humility. She had done it. She had transformed fear into beauty, doubt into expression, and nervousness into confidence. Teachers rushed forward, smiling broadly and congratulating her. Her parents were at the front of the hall, beaming, tears in their eyes, and clapping with all their might. Some audience members came closer, expressing how moved they had been by the performance. The small girl felt a wave of gratitude and happiness, realizing that her music had reached them in a way that words could never describe. She had shared a piece of herself, her emotions, and her heart, and people had responded with wonder and admiration. The small girl stepped down from the piano bench, feeling exhausted but exhilarated. Her small hands tingled from the effort, her heart raced, and her mind buzzed with the memory of every note she had played. She walked to her parents, who embraced her warmly, whispering how proud they were. In that moment, she understood that the journey had been more than just performing. It had been about courage, dedication, trust, and connection. Throughout the rest of the event, people approached her to express their amazement. Teachers praised her skill, creativity, and poise. Parents shared how deeply moved they had been, some even expressing that they had never expected such emotion from a young child. Children looked up to her with admiration, inspired to explore their own talents. The small girl listened quietly, her modesty intact, but inside she felt a growing sense of confidence and pride. As she walked home with her parents after the event, she reflected on the performance. She realized that what had shocked everyone was not just the technical skill, but the emotion, creativity, and courage she had shown. She had taken a familiar piece of music and made it her own, sharing a story through her fingers and heart. The applause, the awe, and the admiration were rewarding, but the real joy came from knowing that she had expressed herself fully, without fear or hesitation. That night, as she lay in bed, she thought about the piano, the audience, and the music. She understood that this was just the beginning. The experience had changed her, giving her a new perspective on what she was capable of. She had learned that talent was only part of the journey, and that courage, emotion, and dedication were just as important. She drifted off to sleep with a quiet smile, dreaming of the next piece she would play, the next audience she would touch, and the endless possibilities that awaited her as a musician and a storyteller. After her unforgettable performance, the small girl experienced a mix of emotions that stayed with her long after leaving the school hall. She felt proud, happy, and somewhat overwhelmed by the attention she received, but she also felt a quiet humility, understanding that her journey had been about more than applause. Walking home with her parents, she held their hands and reflected on everything that had led her to this moment. The early mornings of practice, the moments of doubt, and the quiet encouragement of her family. She realized that she had learned something invaluable. Courage and dedication could transform fear into beauty. Back at home, her parents celebrated her achievement in their own quiet way. They set the piano area with a small bouquet of flowers and a note that said, "You did wonderfully." The girl smiled, feeling the warmth of their love and support. She played a few notes softly, reliving moments from her performance, and noticed how much more confident her fingers had become. The music that once made her nervous now felt natural and comforting, like an old friend she could always return to. In the days that followed, word of her performance spread through the school and the community. Teachers praised her courage and talent, and parents who had attended the event often spoke of how touched they were by her playing. Some suggested she take part in other performances, while others encouraged her to continue developing her gift. The small girl listened quietly, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness at the thought of future opportunities. She understood that each performance would bring new challenges, but she also knew that she had already proven something important, that she could rise to the occasion when she believed in herself. At school, her classmates began to see her in a new light. Children who had never spoken to her before approached, curious about how she had managed to play with such skill and emotion. Some wanted to learn from her, while others simply wanted to express admiration. The small girl responded with gentle smiles, happy to share her experience without feeling pressured to become the center of attention. She realized that her music had the power to connect people, inspire them, and create small moments of joy, and she found a quiet satisfaction in knowing that she had made a difference. Her music teacher invited her for an extra practice session, suggesting that she explore more challenging pieces and techniques. The small girl felt a thrill of excitement mixed with nervous anticipation. She realized that there was so much more to learn and discover, and the idea of continuing to grow as a musician made her feel both eager and determined. The teacher guided her gently, offering encouragement and constructive advice, helping her see that talent alone was not enough. It had to be nurtured with patience, discipline, and passion. At home, the girl continued to practice, experimenting with new melodies and rhythms. She began composing small pieces of her own, inspired by feelings, moments, and the world around her. Her parents listened with interest, appreciating her creativity and the way she expressed herself through music. Sometimes they would ask her to play a particular piece she had performed at school, and she would do so with pride, remembering the way the audience had reacted. Each note, each melody became a memory, a story of courage, growth, and discovery. The experience of performing had changed her in ways she hadn't expected. She felt more confident not only in her music but in herself. She realized that she could face challenges, overcome fear, and achieve something meaningful through dedication and courage. The small girl began to notice that this newfound confidence affected other parts of her life as well. She participated more actively in class, expressed her ideas with clarity, and interacted with her peers more comfortably. Music had become more than just a passion, it had become a foundation for self-belief. As weeks passed, the girl received invitations to participate in other local events. Each opportunity brought excitement and a hint of nervousness, but she remembered the lessons learned during her first performance. She approached each stage with care, respect for the audience, and confidence in her preparation. Her parents supported her, attending every performance and providing reassurance whenever she felt anxious. The small girl began to understand that the journey was just as important as the performance itself, and that each experience built her skill, her confidence, and her connection with others. One afternoon, she was approached by a fellow student who wanted to learn how to play the piano. The small girl smiled and agreed to help, sharing tips she had learned and demonstrating techniques she had practiced tirelessly. She realized that teaching others gave her a new perspective on her own abilities and reinforced her understanding of music. The joy of helping someone else discover the beauty of music added another layer of fulfillment to her journey. She understood that talent, when shared, could grow beyond individual achievement and touch others in meaningful ways. Throughout this time, the small girl continued to face challenges. Some pieces were difficult, some performances were nerve-wracking, and occasionally she would make mistakes. But she had learned to approach each situation with patience, resilience, and determination. She knew that perfection was not the goal. Expressing herself and connecting with others through music was what mattered most. Every mistake became a lesson, every success a confirmation of her dedication, and every performance an opportunity to grow. Her community began to recognize her not just for her talent but for her courage and perseverance. Teachers praised her work ethic, parents admired her humility, and children looked up to her as a role model. The small girl realized that the impact of her music went beyond notes and melodies. It inspired others to believe in themselves, to try, and to explore their own abilities. She felt a quiet sense of pride, understanding that her journey was not just about personal achievement, but about contributing to a larger story of inspiration and possibility. One evening, as she sat at the piano, she reflected on the first time she had been chosen to perform. She remembered the nervousness, the doubt, and the fear of failure. Now, she felt a deep sense of gratitude for that experience. It had pushed her to discover her own potential, to face her fears, and to embrace her talent fully. She played softly, letting the music flow naturally, feeling the joy and fulfillment that came from expressing herself and sharing her gift with the world. The small girl also began to dream bigger. She imagined performing in larger venues, reaching wider audiences, and exploring new styles and compositions. She understood that the journey of a musician was continuous, filled with challenges, learning, and discovery. Yet she felt ready, confident that she had the courage, dedication, and passion to pursue her dreams. Music had become a guiding force in her life, providing structure, expression, and a sense of purpose that she cherished deeply. Her parents watched her with pride, knowing that their quiet encouragement and support had helped nurture not only her talent, but also her character. They understood that the small girl had grown in ways that could not be measured by applause or recognition alone. She had discovered resilience, self-belief, and the ability to inspire others through her music. They felt proud, not just of her performance, but of the young person she was becoming, confident, kind, and determined. The small girl continued to practice daily, exploring new pieces, refining her technique, and experimenting with her own compositions. Each day brought new challenges, but she approached them with a sense of curiosity and determination. She had learned that growth required patience and effort, and she embraced the journey wholeheartedly. Music was no longer just a hobby. It had become a way of life, a language through which she could communicate her emotions, ideas, and imagination. Over time, her story became known beyond her school and community. People spoke of the small girl who had once been quietly chosen to play the piano and had amazed everyone with her courage, skill, and emotion. Her journey inspired other children to pursue their passions, to face their fears, and to believe in their own abilities. The small girl understood that her performance was not just an event. It was a turning point, a moment that had shaped her life and influenced the lives of those around her. As she grew older, she continued to play, perform, and create music. The lessons she had learned from that first performance remained with her. Courage, dedication, resilience, and the power of expression. She understood that true achievement was not measured by applause alone, but by the growth, joy, and connection that music could bring. Her journey had begun as a small girl quietly playing the piano at home, and it had blossomed into a story of inspiration, discovery, and the beauty of sharing one's gift with the world. In the end, the small girl realized that the moment that had once seemed so frightening, the day she was chosen to play the piano, had been the start of something extraordinary. It had taught her to believe in herself, to trust her abilities, and to embrace the courage to perform with heart and authenticity. Her music had touched lives, inspired others, and allowed her to grow into a confident, expressive, and passionate young musician. And though she was still small in stature, her presence, talent, and spirit had grown far beyond what anyone could have imagined, leaving a lasting impression on everyone who heard her play.